Welcome to another episode of the PS We Expire podcast. Today we're going to be talking about self-love. We're going to talk about how self-love affects relationships. We want to talk about if self-love is selfish. Why is self-love important? Self-love and the connection to self-worth and self-awareness. And then lastly, we want to talk about incorporating self-love into our businesses if you are an entrepreneur. So today, that is what we're going to be talking about. And if you think, well, self-love isn't really that big of a deal, like why are we talking about this? I have found that self-love and self-worth has been the cornerstone of really understanding how I view the world and being able to make powerful, positive change in my life from a place of loving myself, truly loving myself. So that's what we're talking about today on this episode of the PS We Expire podcast. I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror one morning, buck naked, and I looked at myself in the eyes and I said to myself, okay, I'm going to be completely honest, totally and completely honest, look myself in the eyes. Can I say to myself, I love you? And I couldn't say it to myself. This was really happened kind of at the beginning of my self-discovery journey several years ago. And this was a powerful experiment for me. What I could say in that moment, as I looked into my own eyes, was, I care about you. So some of this definitely is tied up into body image and the beliefs that I had around what parts of my body were not perfect or up to my acceptable standards or whatever. But deeper than that, just below the surface of what my body looks like, what I wanted to know was, could I honestly say that I loved all the parts of myself? I grew up with the belief that at my core, I was broken and that I was only lovable to a perfect God. And I didn't realize until later how much that damaged my views about not only loving myself, but allowing other people to love me, because I had unconsciously thought, if the only being that can love me is God and that he loves me in spite of myself, what does that mean for imperfect, flawed humans with their own stuff that they're dealing with? No one would ever really love me. Thankfully, there has been a lot of work that has happened since then to undo some of those deeply damaging beliefs about myself. So today, as we talk about self-love, I think probably the number one question that comes up a lot, or the number one point of friction for people, is that they believe that self-love is the same as selfishness. That if people love themselves, that means that they will become completely self-obsessed, self-absorbed, that they won't be able to pay attention to what other people need at all, and they will be completely consumed by their own needs and desires. Now, if you were raised in a way that had you believing that selflessness was the epitome of what it meant to be the best kind of human, so to give of yourself and give of yourself and give of yourself and deplete yourself at your expense, you will always meet other people's needs, that this can feel like a very difficult shift to make mentally and emotionally. And the way that I think about selfishness is kind of like on this like spectrum, or like a pendulum. So if you were raised to believe on this side, on the right side, you've got selflessness, total selflessness, and I would say self-abandonment for the needs of other people. And on the other side, you have completely self-absorbed, narcissistic. Actually, I wouldn't even put narcissism in there. I would just say completely self-focused and self-absorbed. So if you have this pendulum, if when you are learning how to embrace healthy self-love and healthy selfishness, you may end up swinging for a little while over into this other area as you find your kind of homeostasis, or your balance between looking after the needs of others and looking after the needs of yourself. And in that, one of the areas that's going to be very difficult I'll get into this a little bit later, but I'll touch on it right now, is that as you are exploring self-love and exploring what really aligns with your deepest needs, your deepest desires, it's going to be difficult for other people to be okay with new boundaries that are instilled or new ways that you are deciding to spend your time, spend your energy, the things that you want to talk about and the things that you want to explore, the things that you no longer are interested in doing, and the things that you want to do now that maybe don't align with what the people in your life are used to for you. So it can be very jarring. And I do think that many people kind of swing and then they find that it's too uncomfortable. There's too much resistance, from internal resistance and external resistance, that they tend to swing back to the selfless side. But it does feel like once you've experienced and really start to understand what true self-love is, you can't really ever go back to being unaware of how it feels in your body to do the things that really light you up and really align with you. True self-love can never be selfish, because at the root of that, self-love flows from an understanding that we are all one, that we are all in this shared humanity together. And not only that, is that at a deeper level, we all are part of this universal consciousness, this experience of this reality, but that we are all inextricably connected to one another. So we understand that what harms you harms me, what harms me harms you. So selfishness cannot exist when a true deep understanding of what self-love is on a deeper level. So self-love is synonymous with self-worth. True self-love is synonymous with self-worth. And you may find it easier as you're diving into this realm of self-love to exchange that self-worth verbiage in there as you adjust to a new way of thinking about yourself. Self-worth says, I'm worthy of XYZ. I'm worthy of time to rest. I'm worthy of giving my attention to things that feel really good to me. I'm worthy of giving my energy to ideas and environments and experiences that nourish my soul on a really deep level. I'm worthy of having my own back. I'm worthy of paying attention to my feelings about things. I'm worthy. So self-worth and self-love are like this. What I want to ask you is, how can you tell? How can you tell if you have healthy self-love? One of the biggest indicators of how we feel about ourselves is to pay attention to our internal dialogue. Think about it like this, when you mess up, whether you put your foot in your mouth, you say something unkind, or you lose your temper with someone, you lose your temper with your kids, you make a mistake at work, you didn't do what you said you were going to do, you do something that's very awkward and uncomfortable in front of people, how do you talk to yourself about that? Oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did that. Morgan, you're never gonna get any better at this. Why do you keep doing that? Nobody likes you. What you say isn't important. What kind of internal dialogue do you have running through your mind a lot? The best way I have found to be aware of what that internal dialogue is to journal. So what I would recommend if you're new to journaling is to take advantage of it when you feel yourself struggling with something that you're going through. If you just feel that kind of internal angst, I would recommend getting out your journal and start to really just free write what's happening internally. So not only to describe the sensations in your body, but to record what your inner dialogue is. And you may be surprised. You may be surprised at the things that are coming up for you that you didn't even realize were just kind of sitting below the surface. I think that happens a lot, where we are just moderately unaware of what the underlying kind of running dialogue is in our minds. So journaling is a huge way to see how you're talking to yourself in those moments. You also could try the experiment that I tried, where you stand in front of the mirror and look yourself in the eyes and see if you can say honestly to yourself, I love you. Or do you need to substitute other words like I did? I care about you, or Maybe you would say, I don't love you, but to pay attention in those moments to what it feels like in your body when you say things to yourself. How attached are you to the identity of being a selfless person? How attached are you to the identity of being a selfless person? So do you remember, of course you remember, this was not that long ago, I said that I was raised in an environment where selflessness was regarded as the best thing that you could be. And I don't think that you have to have any kind of religious upbringing to believe this. I think that this is definitely a huge part of what is socially not just accepted, but kind of like the narrative socially of what motherhood is all about. Motherhood is touted as like, you always put your children first. You give up yourself, your sense of self to step into that motherhood role. And so a good question is like, how invested am I in that as part of my identity to be a selfless person? Do I have a big part of my identity as the person that everyone can always come to and they know that I will say yes? A good way to know if this flows out of self-love and genuinely wanting to help people versus this identity as a selfless person is to ask yourself how often you feel bitter or resentful for the ways that people, quote unquote, take advantage of you. Self-love isn't that we set up boundaries to keep people out, but self-love is setting up appropriate boundaries, knowing that I may be coming from a place of this over-identification with selflessness that perpetuates me not setting up healthy boundaries with other people. So to ask yourself that, when I say yes to people a lot, how do I feel about that? Do I feel bitter and resentful? That may be an indication that you've got the wrong perspective about self-love. Our self-love is heavily influenced by the people around us, our friends, our family, our spouses. So you can ask yourself, the people that I'm around, how do they talk about themselves? Are they always saying things like I'm such an idiot, or always making disparaging comments about their bodies, or talking about how they can't do things right? How do they talk about others? How do they talk about other people to you? Our brains are so good at noticing patterns and having those be part of that program that's running in the background. So if we have friends that are constantly talking negatively about other people, and we become, or we are most like the people that we spend the most time with, how do you think that that's influencing the way that you're talking about yourself? And if you are talking negatively about other people, you can pretty much guarantee that you're talking negatively about yourself too, because judgment of other people is always an outpouring of the judgment that we have for ourselves. The ways that we behave towards other people is a mirror towards the ways that we behave towards ourselves. So how do your friends, your family talk to you about you? What kinds of things do they say to you? When I talked about the pendulum of selfishness and selflessness, and I said that when you start to recalibrate based on the things that you learn about yourself through self-awareness and the type of personal growth journey that you're on, it can be really difficult for people to adjust. So this is going to be a good indicator to you of how much we're influenced by the people around us. So how do people talk to you about the changes that you're making in your life? The healthy changes based on self-love and self-awareness. How are people talking to you about those? That's going to influence your internal dialogue. It's going to influence how you feel about yourself. Our beliefs about self-love, here's the big one, is this belief that when I get to XYZ place, then I will love myself. So I asked a question of people that follow this podcast. I said, I'm doing an episode on self-love. Let me know kind of what your thoughts are about self-love, what questions you have, what blocks you run into in your journey of self-love. And my friend said, how do you love yourself when you're in the in-between? When you see something that you want for yourself, you have a goal for yourself, you have an ideal for yourself, and you're not there yet. How do you love yourself along the way? If you wait to love yourself when you are quote unquote perfect, you're going to be waiting for the rest of your life. That's just how it is, because if you are committed to self-growth, you will always be changing and you will never arrive. And I think what this is actually asking is, when I get to XYZ place, am I going to feel great all the time? When I am at my ideal weight, or at my ideal income in my business, or in my ideal relationship, or whatever, when I get there, that means that I will feel better and that I won't have to feel these uncomfortable things anymore. I got news for you. That will never arrive. People are perplexed by millionaires and billionaires who are depressed or don't feel like they've got meaning in their life. And my dad used to say, money, they say money can't buy happiness, but I'd really like to see if that was true. It's this belief that we have that when we get to our ideal place, that we're going to feel awesome all the time. And that's not how life works. Life is going to be an ebb and a flow and a give and a take until we die. Because there are things that are going to happen that throw us off balance. There are things that are going to happen that we don't have control over. There are things that are going to happen that are devastating and difficult. And there are things, whether we contribute to those happening or not, that's the nature of life. We're never going to escape that part of it. And self-love teaches you that you don't have to. Self-love teaches you that you don't have to escape the hard things, because self-love contributes to an understanding that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. Now, this brings me to probably the most important part and the most critical part of what I believe self-love really is. Okay, there's this concept in psychology of the shadow self. And it's this idea that you have these parts of you that you don't want to look at. And we've learned in our childhood experiences primarily, but even into adulthood, we've learned what things, what behaviors, what emotions, what questions are acceptable to our families of origin, our extended families, our families now, to our cultures, to our communities. We have learned what things are acceptable to express. And when we have learned that particular things are not acceptable, they go into these little mental and emotional boxes in our subconscious, and they just hang out there. We hide them there. And I really don't believe that we do this intentionally. I really believe that as a result of our main drive and desire for acceptance and for authenticity is what informs what we are going to do with these parts of ourselves. So I've heard it said that as the two main drives are acceptance and authenticity, our acceptance will always win in a contest between the two. So if it comes down to whether or not we are going to be our authentic selves, and I don't mean that in like a very like woo-woo kind of ethereal way, but really authentically being able to express our feelings, being able to express our questions, our doubts, our emotions, from happiness to sadness to rage, etc. If we have learned that there are parts of ourselves that are not acceptable, that somehow threaten our belonging, that is when we will tuck those into that little shadow self box. We don't consciously choose how those parts of ourselves that we've hidden will impact our lives, but they do impact our lives. They impact our relationships. They impact our mental and physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And the importance of self-love and self-worth is this. I can't wait to share this with you guys. Okay. When you have deep, true self-love, you have no fear of popping the lid off of that box and looking inside, because you know at your core, you are not just loved, but you are love. You are part of this mystical, universal love, that you are not broken. You are not separate. You're not separate from other people, and you're not separate from God or source. You're not separate from that. You are part of it. You are it. And so self-love allows you to pop the lid off of that and to see with non-judgmental compassion for yourself, these parts of yourself that you have tucked away and hidden to keep yourself safe. The damaging thing to us when we keep that box so carefully hidden and keep that lid on so tight is that we never then get to understand ourselves fully. How could you? How could you understand yourself fully if there are parts of yourself that you've hidden? Not just from other people but hidden from yourself. And there's everybody does this, okay? So don't think that like there's something wrong with you because you do this. Everybody does this. This is a result of our early childhood experiences primarily. And this is a result of significant events in our lives where our belonging has been at risk. So don't think that there is something wrong with you if you have a shadow self. All of us have a shadow self. All of us have that little box of things that we've kept carefully hidden away. Self-love allows us to be vulnerable with ourselves and vulnerable with others about the things that we're thinking and feeling, the things that we're struggling with. It allows us to see where our beliefs have limited us. It allows us to look at what things we've believed before, but that don't really actually serve us in our lives anymore. Self-love is the number one ingredient to be able to change. Think about this. If you don't believe that you're going to be okay no matter what, because you don't have a good relationship with yourself, you don't have that level of self-love, change is going to be not only scary, but it is going to be incredibly threatening to your survival. Now, I'm pointing to my mind because that's what your brain is going to tell you, is that if I show people these parts of myself, or if I look at these parts of myself, that I'm probably going to die. Our brains don't like it. Our brains don't like it when we do things that are different. And when we have a belief because of the experiences that we've had that parts of ourselves are really unacceptable, we're not going to have the courage to look at those parts of ourselves. I would say that as I shared with you how you can know if you have healthy self-love, one of the things I didn't mention there, but I will here, is how able are you to apologize? How able are you to admit when you did something hurtful or wrong? How able are you to just say, oh yeah, like I totally messed up? To be able to say that from a place where you're going to look at it a bit objectively, because that is what enables you to change and have different behavior. It doesn't come from a place of, oh man, I can't believe I did that. I'm a total piece of crap. Oh, I'm the worst person ever. So, I mean, some people will do that when they apologize. And I would offer that maybe that is not only coming from a place of like deep self-distrust, but also from a place of where we are requiring somebody else to make us feel better because we don't know how to do that for ourselves. Self-love is the thing that not only helps us navigate really difficult things in our lives, but it also is what produces the most amount of joy. Because if there are parts of ourselves that we're not willing to look at, we have a difficult time really integrating all the parts and pieces of ourselves that make up this idea of wholeness. So in our understanding of ourselves wholly, we really can start to become more aligned with what our purpose is, what feels so deeply satisfying. I'm not talking about surface pleasures. I'm not talking about the pleasures that our brains love in the form of, quick calories or quick dopamine hits or whatever. I'm not going to even edit that out of that. And I'll tell you why. So I had a whiteboard propped up against some kind of flimsy things. And I thought to myself, maybe I should shore that up a little bit more before I started this. And I didn't. So big bang, crash, all that just fell off of my desk, knocked over my whole jar of pens and pencils, etc. I don't feel like an idiot. I don't feel like I did anything wrong or anything bad or stupid for doing that. I say, oh, Morgan, now you can do it differently next time. It's fine. Okay, so right there, what is your internal dialogue like when things like that happen in your life, whether big or small? Okay, now I forgot what I was talking about. What I was talking about was being in alignment with ourselves and in our wholeness, when we aren't afraid to look at all parts of ourselves, when we're not afraid to open up that box and see the pieces of ourselves that we've hidden. Now, one of the other insights that I had from someone writing in was, can you talk about self-love in entrepreneurship? Okay, so yes, of course we can talk about self-love in entrepreneurship, because how you show up in one area of your life is how you likely show up in many areas of your life. So if you're showing up in your business with this kind of like self-loathing or insecurity or this lack of self-belief, self-worth, you absolutely will see that in your business practices. So all of our relationships in our lives are mirrors of what's happening on the inside for us. All of them. Even the relationships that we have with our business. So any problems that you have, any sticking points that you have in entrepreneurship in your business, you can trace back to sticking points for you personally. So let's think about, I was an interior designer for 6 years. And when I first started out, oh man, I had a lot of beliefs about money that I had to work through. A lot of beliefs about money. So if you want to talk about that box, I had some beliefs in my shadow self box that people who had a lot of money were evil, right? And that charging people money was not okay, that it meant that I was greedy. So when I was able to address those beliefs that I had about money and what my beliefs about money meant about me as a person, as, somebody who wanted to do good and be good in the world, is when I was able to address some of those subconscious beliefs and behaviors to start charging appropriately in my business and start having a profitable business. It definitely trickles down when you have customers or clients with negative experiences. If you have somebody with a negative experience and they're saying terrible things about you, if you have a filter of self-love, you can take those things with a grain of salt and understand that they're projections from that other person. Okay. They may have negative things to say about your processes and your systems, in which case, yeah, absolutely. Don't poo-poo yourself or look down on yourself for that. Just understand, okay, I didn't know that before and I know it now. I think that this is one of the best benefits of self-love, is this undercurrent of peace. That anything that comes up doesn't mean that I am less lovable or less worthy to anybody or to myself, but that it's all feedback. Our feelings are feedback for what we're thinking about. The information that we get from other people is more information about them and how they think. And it also, like I said, it mirrors to you the things that you think about, how you operate in the world, and projections that you're putting out. There is no downside to self-love. Absolutely zero downside to self-love. Now, if you are in the position where you're saying, okay, Morgan, I understand how important self-love is. I understand what things I can do to see if I have a healthy level of self-love. And I see that I want to increase my self-love, or I want to address that for the first time in my life. Where do I start? Okay, and I'm going to get my notes. I love this little exercise. Get out a piece of paper, and I want you to finish this sentence. I feel, well, and choose your verbiage here, which works best for you. I feel most alive. I feel most aligned. I feel most satisfied when and then fill in the blank. Don't overthink this. I feel most alive when I feel most aligned when I feel most satisfied when some of mine would be, I feel most alive when I am out in nature. I feel most alive when I am fleshing out something in my business. I feel most satisfied when I am creating something with my hands. For some of you, it might be, I feel most satisfied when I have my cat laying on my stomach and I'm petting it. I feel most alive when I'm playing a game with my children. I feel most alive when I'm having deep conversations with other people. Okay, so don't overthink this. Finish this statement. I feel most alive, aligned, or satisfied when I. Okay, then what I want you to do is start scheduling time for those things into your schedule. Start putting it in your schedule. This is going to be very difficult for people that are used to filling up their schedules with others' needs, and also used to filling up your schedule with things that don't actually align with. Now, obviously, like there's things that we have to do to just keep maintenance going on in our lives. Like there's dishes to be washed and laundry to be done and groceries to buy. But what I would suggest is not only infusing into those mundane tasks things that help you feel alive. So, one of mine is I feel most alive or aligned when I'm listening to music, certain types of music. So when I'm doing those things, listen to good music or play a podcast. So infuse those into those routine kind of daily habit things that you have, but also really schedule some time for yourself to do those things and then stick to it. So one of the best and probably most difficult things is to put it in your schedule and then commit to doing it. And I can guarantee you that when you put that in your schedule, something else will come up, always. I don't think that this happens the longer you do it, but I do think that this happens a lot in the beginning as you're shifting how you move through life. So part of that is because of the pendulum effect of other people not being maybe on board or sure how they fit into these new boundaries that you're setting for yourself, or maybe they don't like it. Maybe you've decided that you're going to go to bed at a certain time at night and that's not how you had been doing things for a long time. Or you're getting up early. That's not how you've done things for a long time. Or you're taking a nap in the middle of the day. And that's, if it goes against the way that you've always done things, you can expect resistance. I also think that there's this kind of like nice little test that happens when we put something on the calendar that isn't quote unquote productive. We put something on the calendar that feeds our creativity, that feeds our presence and our soul. That there's something that's going to come up that seeks to disrupt that or unearth that. Stick to it. Obviously, if there's like an emergency or life or death situation, duh. But there are many things that we probably consider to be like emergencies that really aren't. So I want you to prioritize these activities, these ways of being that make you feel alive. Part of what is so positive about this is that as you continue to keep commitments to yourself, even in the commitments that maybe don't make sense to other people or that feel maybe kind of frivolous, is that you are going to start building up some self-trust with yourself. That little part of you that you have shushed for a long time or neglected or maybe only addressed every now and then when you had the energy or time to do it. That little part of yourself is going to, that still small voice right, is going to start speaking up again. And if you have a long habit of not listening to that voice, it's going to take some adjustment for you to understand what they sound like, what you sound like. But as you build up trust for yourself and you basically are telling yourself, I'm worth keeping these commitments to myself, that part of you is going to start to believe you that they can trust you with those deep, meaningful pieces of themselves, of yourself. So building up that self-trust through keeping commitments to yourself is huge. Notice your internal dialogue. I've already addressed this, but this is a great way to address and increase your self-love. To notice your internal dialogue, use a journal, use a notes app in your phone, use the voice memo app. Even if you are going through something hard, you're recognizing a spiral of thoughts, and you just open up a voice memo and you just start saying out loud the things that you are thinking. This, one of the best things about journaling and a great thing about even doing the voice memos is that our brains are not meant to be storage containers. They're meant to be processors. And so if we are using our brains to store a lot of stuff, it just keeps bogging the systems down. So when you journal or when you do these voice memos, you're getting it out of your system. There has to be some type of release for that negative internal dialogue, because if you don't, it just gets stored in your body and continues to perpetuate those patterns. So get those out of your mind. Then when you have them out, you can actually see what they are. I think so many times we are not even aware of that internal dialogue that we have. We don't even understand or recognize what's going on beneath the surface. Journaling will help you get that out. And then I think you will be amazed at when you go back and read what you have written, some of the things that you think about yourself, some of the things that you think about others, some of the things that are continuing to cause you to have maybe unhealthy patterns in your life. And then I want you to examine your input. So this is going to be your social input from the people that you spend time with. Again, like, how are they talking about themselves? How are they talking about others? How are they talking about you? I want you to pay attention to your technological input. If you find yourself having negative self-talk when you spend time on a particular app, I would really recommend, maybe doing a fast from that app to get some more insight into what's being activated in you when you spend time on those apps. So perhaps if you have some negative body issues, and you're noticing that when you spend time on, say Instagram or something, the accounts that you're following are contributing to you not feeling great about your body, maybe start unfollowing a lot of people on your list, or making sure that you're limiting the amount of time that you spend in those places that contribute to you feeling like that. So examine your technological input and examine your nutritional input. I have had such a better experience of being able to manage some of that internal dialogue when I'm eating well. So some of it is just a byproduct of the things that I'm eating. So I know for myself, because I've done a lot of experimentation, if you want some more insight on this particular topic, I recommend listening to the podcast episode on anxiety, because I share about my nutritional choices heavily affecting my levels of anxiety and my management of that. But my nutritional input also really impacts how well I am able to manage that internal dialogue, and also how I feel about myself. So, if I'm eating foods that are making me feel like bloated all the time, I may have a more difficult time just controlling the negative internal dialogue. I may just have, brain fog. I may be more exhausted, which makes it more difficult to express myself in healthy ways and to have that internal dialogue that contributes more to my efforts towards greater self-love. So that's what I'm going to recommend as far as like practical ways to notice your levels of self-love and also increase your levels of self-love. But I want to go back to what I said about, at the root, all of this conversation is, what do we believe about who we are? When we strip away all the labels, I'm not Morgan Lee Motzinger. Those are two names that my parents gave me and one name that my marriage gave me. I am not the things that I do. I'm not all these labels that I put on myself. When I go beneath all of those layers, who am I at my core? Who am I at my core? And the belief that we have about who that is absolutely impacts what we believe about everything else. Not only does it impact what we believe about ourselves and how we decide to move through the world, how we show up in the world, but it impacts how we view other people. If we have a belief that we are separate from others, then the harm that we do, we think doesn't touch us. And I don't just mean individual harm, but even collective harm that we do to others, right? But if you believe and you operate from a place of, we are not separate, we are all one, we are all connected in this existence, and even out of this existence, we're all connected to love. That absolutely has an impact on how we treat ourselves and how we treat others. So self-love is a much bigger deal than just having good self-esteem. Self-love is a much bigger deal than how we feel about our bodies. Self-love has much more far-reaching impacts than how we feel about, our businesses or the labels that we decide to wear, the labels that have been given to us. But the far-reaching impact of self-love is collective love. How we love others, how we show up for others, how we show up for ourselves. Well, I love you all, truly. And before I go, P.S. we expire.